The arena fell silent. 50,000 people held their breath as the two giants stood face to face in the center of the ring. The younger man's hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of 15 years of preparation for this single moment. Across from him, Muhammad Ali smiled that famous smile, but his eyes held something different tonight, a depth that seemed to pierce through souls. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the moment we've all been waiting for." The announcer's voice boomed through Madison Square Garden, but it felt distant, like an echo from another world. In the blue corner, weighing in at 218 pounds, the undefeated challenger who has demolished every opponent in his path, Tommy the Thunder Morrison from Detroit, Michigan. The crowd's roar was deafening, but Tommy barely heard it. His eyes were locked on Ali, studying every muscle, every movement, every breath. This was it. This was what his entire life had been building toward. Tommy Morrison had been 8 years old when he first saw Muhammad Ali fight on his family's small black and white television in their cramped apartment on Detroit's East Side. His father, a former amateur boxer himself, had lost his job at the Ford plant just weeks before, and the family was struggling to make ends meet. But that night, watching Ali dance around the ring with impossible grace and power, something ignited in young Tommy's chest. "Look at him move, son," his father had whispered, pointing at the screen with a calloused finger. "That man right there. He's not just fighting with his fists, he's fighting with his heart, his mind, his soul. That's what makes a champion." Tommy's mother, Sarah, had walked into the living room, carrying a basket of clothes that needed mending, another source of income for the family. She paused behind the worn couch where her husband and son sat transfixed by the fight. "William, don't go filling the boy's head with impossible dreams," she said softly, but there was no real conviction in her voice. She too found herself drawn to the magnetic presence of the man on screen. "It's not impossible, Sarah," William Morrison replied, never taking his eyes off Ali. "Look at where he came from. Look at what he's overcome. If that man can become heavyweight champion of the world, then anything's possible for anyone willing to work for it." That night, 8-year-old Tommy Morrison made a promise to himself. He would train every single day until he was strong enough, fast enough, and skilled enough to step into a ring with Muhammad Ali. He would become the man who finally defeated the greatest boxer who ever lived. The next morning, Tommy was up before dawn, running through the empty streets of Detroit. The city was just beginning to wake up, streetlights still glowing in the early morning darkness. His breath formed small clouds in the cold February air as his feet pounded against the concrete. He had no training plan, no coach, no equipment, just a burning desire that seemed to consume him from the inside out. His father found him in the basement later that morning, throwing punches at an old heavy bag that William had hung from the ceiling beams years ago, but rarely used. The bag was worn and patched in several places, but it was solid enough to take the enthusiastic but poorly formed punches of an 8-year-old boy. "Tommy, what are you doing down here?" "Training, Dad. I'm going to fight Muhammad Ali someday." William Morrison looked at his son, really looked at him, and saw something he recognized. It was the same fire he'd had as a young man before life and circumstances had slowly extinguished it. But in Tommy, that fire burned brighter than William had ever seen in anyone. "All right then," William said, rolling up his sleeves. "If you're going to do this, we're going to do it right. First thing you need to learn is how to stand." For the next hour, William taught his son the basic boxing stance, how to hold his hands, how to move his feet. Tommy absorbed every word, every correction, every piece of advice like a sponge. When his mother called them up for breakfast, Tommy was already planning his afternoon training session. This became their routine. Every morning before school, Tommy would run. Every evening after dinner, father and son would go down to the basement where William shared everything he knew about boxing. It wasn't much. William had never been more than a decent amateur, but it was enough to get Tommy started on the fundamentals. As weeks turned into months, Tommy's dedication never wavered. While other kids his age were playing video games or watching cartoons, Tommy was studying footage of Muhammad Ali fights that he'd recorded on their old VCR. He watched Ali's footwork, his head movement, his combinations, over and over until he could predict every punch before it was thrown. "The boy's obsessed," Sarah confided to her sister during one of their weekly phone calls. "All he talks about is boxing. All he thinks about is boxing. I'm starting to worry it's not healthy." But William saw something different. He saw a kind of focus and determination that was rare in anyone, let alone a child. Tommy wasn't just playing at boxing, he was studying it like a scholar, approaching it with the seriousness of someone much older. When Tommy turned 10, William managed to scrape together enough money to buy his son proper boxing gloves and register him at Murphy's Gym, a run-down boxing facility on the west side of Detroit. The gym had seen better days. The paint was peeling, the equipment was old, and the smell of sweat and leather had seeped into every surface, but it was home to some of the best trainers in the city. Mickey Murphy, the gym's owner and head trainer, was a gruff Irishman in his 60s who had trained 3 world champions during his career. He took one look at Tommy, this skinny kid with intensity burning in his eyes, and saw something that made him pause. "What do you want, boy?" Mickey asked in his gravelly voice. "I want to learn how to beat Muhammad Ali," Tommy replied without hesitation. Mickey laughed, but it wasn't a mean laugh. It was the laugh of someone who appreciated audacity. "You and about 1,000,000 other fighters, kid. What makes you think you're different?" Tommy looked Mickey straight in the eye. "Because I'll work harder than all of them. I'll do whatever it takes." Something in the boy's voice made Mickey believe him. "All right then, let's see what you're made of." What followed was the most grueling training regimen Tommy had ever experienced. Mickey didn't believe in taking it easy on young fighters. His philosophy was simple. If you couldn't handle the training, you'd never handle the fight. Tommy threw up after his first real workout. He came home with bruises from sparring sessions with kids twice his size. His hands bled from hitting the heavy bag until Mickey finally taught him how to wrap them properly. But Tommy never complained. He never missed a training session. When other kids quit because it was too hard, Tommy stayed. When injuries slowed him down, he found ways to train around them. When his family couldn't afford the gym fees, Tommy worked odd jobs around the neighborhood to pay his own way. By the time Tommy was 13, he was already causing a stir in amateur boxing circles. He had grown tall for his age and filled out with the kind of muscle that comes from years of dedicated training. More importantly, he had developed a boxing style that was uniquely his own, a blend of power and speed that reminded veteran trainers of a young Muhammad Ali. "The kid's got something special," Mickey told William after one particularly impressive sparring session. "I've been training fighters for 40 years, and I've never seen anything quite like this. He doesn't just want to win, he needs to win. It's like something's driving him from the inside." Tommy's amateur career was nothing short of spectacular. He won his first tournament at 13, defeating boys who were older and more experienced. By 15, he was the Golden Gloves champion in his weight class. By 17, he was being recruited by colleges and professional promoters who saw dollar signs in his combination of skill and marketability. But Tommy had no interest in college, and he turned down every professional offer that came his way. He had one goal, and everything else was just a distraction. Muhammad Ali was still fighting, still winning, still dancing around the ring with that supernatural grace that had captivated an 8-year-old boy in Detroit. "You're making a mistake, son," one promoter told him after Tommy turned down a 6-figure signing bonus. "Ali's getting older. By the time you're ready for him, he might be retired." "Then I'll wait," Tommy replied, "however long it takes." Tommy's 18th birthday came and went without fanfare. He was too focused on training to care about celebrations. Muhammad Ali was 34 years old now, and though he was still champion, there were whispers that he was slowing down, that the years of punishment were starting to take their toll. Tommy knew this was his window. He turned professional 3 days after his 18th birthday, signing with a small but respected management company that promised to fast-track him to a title shot. His professional debut was a first-round knockout that sent shockwaves through the boxing world. Here was this unknown kid from Detroit who fought like he had nothing to lose and everything to prove. The wins kept coming. Second-round knockout, third-round knockout, decision victory over a former contender, another knockout. The boxing press started calling him the Thunder after the devastating power he displayed in both hands. But Tommy knew his power wasn't just physical. It came from 15 years of singular focus, 15 years of preparing for one specific fight. "He's ready," Mickey told the reporters who had started gathering at the gym to watch Tommy train. "I've never trained anyone who was more ready for anything in my life. This boy has been preparing for Muhammad Ali since he was 8 years old. He knows Ali's style better than Ali knows it himself." The call finally came on a Tuesday afternoon in March. Tommy was in the middle of a sparring session when Mickey's assistant interrupted to say there was an important phone call. Tommy knew what it was before he picked up the phone. "Mr. Morrison, this is Don King. I think it's time we talked about making the fight the whole world wants to see." The contract negotiations took 3 months, but Tommy would have fought for free. The purse was the largest ever offered to a challenger, $5 million, win or lose, but money had never been Tommy's motivation. This was about fulfilling a promise he'd made to himself as a child, about proving that impossible dreams could become reality through dedication and sacrifice. The fight was scheduled for September 15th at Madison Square Garden. Ali versus Morrison, the greatest versus the Thunder. The aging champion against the young lion who had trained his entire life for this one opportunity. The press conference was a circus. Ali, now 36, still possessed that magnetic charisma that had made him the most famous athlete in the world. He joked with reporters, recited impromptu poetry, and predicted victory with the confidence that had become his trademark. "This young man thinks he knows something about Muhammad Ali," Ali said, gesturing toward Tommy with that famous smile. "But you can't learn Muhammad Ali from watching films. You can't understand Muhammad Ali by studying tapes. Muhammad Ali is an original, and originals can't be copied or defeated by imitation." Tommy sat quietly through most of the press conference, answering questions with the kind of focused intensity that made reporters slightly uncomfortable. When asked about his chances, he simply said, "I've been ready for this fight for 15 years. Muhammad Ali has been ready for this fight for 15 minutes. The comment made headlines, but Tommy didn't care about headlines. He cared about the work that still needed to be done. The final 6 months of preparation were unlike anything Tommy had ever experienced. Mickey brought in sparring partners who mimicked Ali's style. They studied every fight Ali had ever had, breaking down his patterns, his tendencies, his favorite combinations. Tommy's training became an obsession within an obsession, 16 hours a day of physical and mental preparation for the biggest fight in boxing history. "You know what your advantage is?" Mickey asked him one evening as they watched film of Ali's most recent fight. "He's been great for so long. He's forgotten what it's like to be hungry. But you, son, you've been hungry your whole life. That hunger is going to carry you when your body wants to quit." As the fight drew closer, the media attention became overwhelming. Sports Illustrated put Tommy on the cover with the headline, "David versus Goliath. Can Detroit's thunderstorm upset the greatest?" ESPN ran a documentary about Tommy's journey from an 8-year-old dreamer to championship contender. The whole world, it seemed, was watching. But in the quiet moments, when the cameras were gone and the reporters had left, Tommy would sit alone in his hotel room and think about that 8-year-old boy watching Muhammad Ali on a black and white television. That boy had believed in something impossible, and somehow, impossibly, here he was. The night before the fight, Tommy couldn't sleep. He walked out onto the balcony of his hotel room and looked out over the lights of New York City. Somewhere out there, Muhammad Ali was probably sleeping peacefully, confident in his abilities, secure in his legacy. But Tommy wasn't thinking about legacy or confidence. He was thinking about the promise he'd made to himself, and tomorrow he would finally keep it. The morning of the fight arrived grey and overcast, but by evening the sky had cleared and stars were visible above Madison Square Garden. Tommy arrived at the arena 4 hours early, wanting to soak in every moment, to be fully present for the culmination of his life's work. In the dressing room, Mickey helped him wrap his hands with the same methodical care they'd practiced thousands of times. "Remember everything we've worked on," Mickey said quietly. "Remember why you're here, but most importantly, remember that you belong here. You've earned this moment." Tommy nodded, feeling calmer than he'd expected. All the nerves, all the anticipation, all the pressure seemed to fall away. This was just another day at the gym, just another sparring session, except this time it mattered more than anything had ever mattered. The walk to the ring felt like a dream. The crowd was on its feet, 50,000 people creating a wall of sound that seemed to shake the building itself. Tommy's team walked ahead of him, but he felt completely alone, completely focused, completely ready. And then he saw Muhammad Ali. Even at 36, even after years of punishment, Ali still moved with that liquid grace that had mesmerized the world. He bounced on his toes, shadow-boxed for the crowd, and smiled that megawatt smile that had launched 1,000 magazine covers. But when his eyes met Tommy's across the ring, something passed between them, a recognition perhaps of what this moment meant to both of them. The referee called them to the center of the ring for final instructions. This was it. This was the moment Tommy Morrison had been preparing for since he was 8 years old. Everything else, the crowd, the cameras, the commentary, faded into background noise. "I want a clean fight," the referee said, his voice barely audible over the roar of the crowd. "Protect yourself at all times, obey my commands, and may the best man win." Tommy looked into Ali's eyes and saw something he hadn't expected. Respect. Not the condescending respect of a veteran for a promising newcomer, but the genuine respect of one warrior for another. Ali extended his gloved hand and Tommy took it. "You ready for this, young man?" Ali asked, his voice just loud enough for Tommy to hear. "I've been ready my whole life," Tommy replied. Ali nodded slowly, as if he understood something that the rest of the world didn't. "Then let's give them something to remember." They returned to their corners, and Tommy felt the weight of 15 years of preparation settling on his shoulders. In the front row, he could see his parents. His father wearing the same suit he'd worn to Tommy's high school graduation, his mother clutching a rosary and trying not to cry. Mickey stood on the ring apron, his weathered face a mask of concentration. The bell rang. Tommy moved forward cautiously, remembering everything Mickey had taught him about Ali's style. The champion was a counterpuncher who used his superior reach and lightning-fast reflexes to make opponents miss, then capitalize on their mistakes. But Tommy had studied those patterns for years, had drilled against them until his responses were automatic. Ali circled to his left, hands low, that famous smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He was talking, as he always did, a constant stream of chatter designed to distract and intimidate his opponents. "Come on, young thunder," Ali called out. "Show me what 15 years of preparation looks like." Tommy feinted with his left, then threw a probing jab that Ali slipped easily. But Tommy had expected that. It was exactly what the film study had predicted. He followed immediately with a right cross that whistled past Ali's ear as the champion leaned back with that supernatural timing. "Not bad," Ali said, dancing away, "but you're going to have to do better than that." The first round was a chess match. Tommy pressed forward, using his youth and strength to try to back Ali against the ropes. Ali gave ground willingly, content to let Tommy expend energy while he studied his opponent's patterns. Twice, Ali found openings for his lightning-fast jab, snapping Tommy's head back and drawing roars from the crowd. But Tommy didn't get discouraged. This was exactly what he'd expected. Ali always started slow, feeling out his opponents, looking for weaknesses to exploit later. Tommy knew that his best chance would come in the middle rounds, when Ali's age might start to show and his own conditioning would be at its peak. The bell ended the first round, and Mickey climbed through the ropes with ice and instructions. "Perfect," Mickey said, applying the ice to a small cut above Tommy's left eye. "You're staying calm, you're not chasing him, you're making him work. Keep doing exactly what you're doing." Tommy nodded, but his eyes never left Ali's corner. The champion was sitting calmly, sipping water and chatting with his trainer, as if this were just another day at the office. But Tommy noticed something. Ali's breathing was slightly labored, more than it should have been, after just 3 minutes of relatively light work. The second round began with Ali being more aggressive. He came forward behind his jab, using his 7-inch reach advantage to keep Tommy at distance. But Tommy had prepared for this too. He slipped inside Ali's jab and landed a solid left hook to the body that made the champion grunt. "There you go," Ali said, backing up with his hands higher now. "I was wondering when you were going to start fighting." Tommy pressed his advantage, throwing combinations to the body and head. Ali covered up well, but Tommy could feel his punches having an effect. The crowd was on its feet now, sensing that this wasn't going to be the easy night for Ali that many had predicted. Midway through the second round, Tommy caught Ali with a perfect right hand that snapped the champion's head back violently. Ali stumbled backward, his legs momentarily unsteady, and for a split second Tommy thought he might have hurt him badly. But Ali recovered quickly, clinching and holding until his head cleared. "Good shot, son," he whispered in Tommy's ear as they were tied up. "But it's going to take more than one punch to finish Muhammad Ali." The rounds passed in a blur of leather and sweat. Tommy fought with the precision of a surgeon and the intensity of a man possessed. He had studied Ali so thoroughly that he seemed to anticipate the champion's moves before Ali made them. In the fourth round, he caught Ali with another hard right hand. In the sixth, a left hook to the body doubled Ali over briefly. By the eighth round, it was clear that something special was happening. Tommy Morrison, the unknown challenger from Detroit, was not just competing with Muhammad Ali, he was winning. The scorecards were close, but Tommy's youth and power were starting to tell. Ali's movements, while still graceful, had lost a step. His punches, while still accurate, lacked their usual snap. "He's hurt," Mickey told Tommy between rounds. "You've got him hurt, but don't get careless. A hurt Muhammad Ali is the most dangerous Muhammad Ali." Tommy nodded, but inside he felt something he'd never experienced before. This was really happening. He was actually beating Muhammad Ali. The dream he'd carried since childhood was becoming reality, and it was almost too much to process. The ninth round started with Ali coming out more aggressively than he had all night. He seemed to have found a second wind, and his combinations were crisp and accurate. Tommy covered up, weaving and blocking, waiting for the storm to pass. But Ali kept coming. A 3-punch combination caught Tommy flush, backing him against the ropes. The crowd roared as Ali followed up with a devastating left hook that sent Tommy stumbling along the ropes. Tommy was hurt, really hurt, for the first time in the fight. His vision blurred momentarily, and his legs felt like rubber. Ali sensed his opportunity and pressed forward, throwing punches with the desperation of a champion who could feel his crown slipping away. But Tommy's conditioning, built through 15 years of obsessive training, served him well. He covered up, moved his head, and weathered the storm. As the round entered its final minute, Ali's burst of energy began to fade, and Tommy found his legs again. With 30 seconds left in the round, Tommy caught Ali with an uppercut that lifted the champion off his feet. Ali's knees buckled, and for a moment it looked like he might go down. But somehow Ali stayed upright, even managing a weak smile as the bell rang. The 10th round would prove to be the turning point of the fight. Tommy came out aggressively, sensing that Ali was truly vulnerable for the first time. He worked the body methodically, then came upstairs with hooks and crosses that found their mark with increasing frequency. Ali, for his part, was fighting on pure instinct now. His legs were gone, his reflexes were a half-second slow, and Tommy's relentless pressure was wearing him down. But he was still Muhammad Ali, and he was still dangerous. Midway through the round, Ali caught Tommy with a perfectly timed counter right hand that stopped Tommy in his tracks. For a moment, the two fighters stood toe-to-toe in the center of the ring, trading punches with the fury of men who knew that everything they'd worked for hung in the balance. It was then, in that moment of pure violence and competition, that something extraordinary happened. Ali stepped back, lowered his hands slightly, and looked directly into Tommy's eyes. The noise of the crowd seemed to fade, and for just an instant it was as if they were the only two people in the world. Ali moved closer, and in the clinch that followed, he whispered something in Tommy's ear. The words were so quiet that no one else could hear them. Not the referees standing inches away, not the television audience of millions, not even the people in the front row. But Tommy heard them. And what Muhammad Ali whispered in that moment changed everything. "Your father," Ali said, his voice barely audible over the crowd's roar, "told me to tell you he's proud of you. William Morrison. He came to see me yesterday." Tommy's world stopped. His father had died 3 years ago from a heart attack, alone in that same basement where he'd first taught Tommy how to stand and throw a punch. Tommy had been away at training camp, preparing for a fight in California when it happened. The guilt of not being there in his father's final moments had haunted him ever since. "What?" Tommy whispered back, but Ali had already broken the clinch and stepped away. The referee separated them, and the fight continued, but Tommy's mind was reeling. How could Ali know about his father? Why would he say something like that now, in the middle of the biggest fight of both their careers? Tommy threw a weak jab, his concentration completely shattered. Ali, perhaps sensing his confusion, didn't press his advantage. Instead, he seemed to be studying Tommy's face, looking for something. "He told me about the promise you made," Ali continued during their next clinch. "About watching me on that old television. He said you never missed a day of training. Not once in 15 years. Tommy felt tears welling up in his eyes. This was impossible. His father was dead. But somehow the details Ali was sharing were too specific, too personal for him to have learned them from anyone else. "He wanted you to know," Ali whispered as they broke apart again, "that he never doubted you would make it here. He said the day you first saw me fight, he knew you had something special inside you." The round ended with Tommy in a complete daze. He walked to his corner mechanically, but he wasn't really there. Mickey was talking to him, giving him instructions for the 11th round, but the words weren't registering. "Tommy!" Mickey grabbed his fighter's face with both hands. "What's wrong with you? You had him hurt, and now you're fighting like you don't want to be here." Tommy looked at his trainer, this man who had devoted the last 8 years of his life to preparing him for this moment, and tried to find words for what had just happened. "Mickey," Tommy said quietly, "did anyone talk to you about my father? Did anyone tell Ali about him?" Mickey's confusion was genuine. "What are you talking about?" "Tommy, you need to focus. You're ahead on the scorecards, but you can't afford to give away rounds now." The bell rang for the 11th round, and Tommy walked to the center of the ring like a man in a trance. Ali was waiting for him, and there was something different in the champion's eyes now, a gentleness that hadn't been there before. "He's watching you fight," Ali said as they touched gloves. "Right now, he's watching his son fulfill the promise he made as a boy." Tommy felt his knees almost buckle. "How do you know this? How is this possible?" Ali didn't answer directly. Instead, he began to fight with a strange combination of intensity and restraint. He would land clean shots on Tommy, then pull back when he could have followed up for a knockout. It was as if he were testing something, or waiting for something. "Your father told me something else," Ali said during another clinch. "He said the day you win this fight, you'll finally be able to forgive yourself for not being there when he died." That broke Tommy completely. He had never told anyone about the guilt he carried, about the nightmares where he arrived at the hospital just moments too late, about the way he threw himself into training even harder after the funeral, because the physical pain was easier to bear than the emotional pain. Tommy stopped fighting and looked directly at Ali. "You're lying," he said, but there was no conviction in his voice. Ali shook his head slowly. "I don't lie about things like this, son. Your father came to me in a dream 3 nights ago, clear as I'm seeing you now. He told me that if I could give you his message, you'd finally be able to let go of that weight you've been carrying." The referee warned them to continue fighting, but both men seemed frozen in place. "He said to tell you," Ali continued, "that he was never prouder of you than the day you kept training, even after you got the news about his heart attack. He said most men would have quit, would have given up on their dreams, but you honored him by finishing what you started." Tommy felt something break inside his chest, a wall that he'd built around his heart to protect himself from the pain of loss. Tears were streaming down his face now, mixing with the sweat and blood of 11 hard rounds. "I miss him so much," Tommy whispered. "I know you do," Ali replied. "But he's not really gone, son. He's in every punch you throw, every step you take, every dream you chase. He's been with you this whole time." The two fighters stood in the center of the ring, no longer opponents, but two human beings sharing a moment of profound connection. The crowd, sensing that something extraordinary was happening, but not understanding what, had fallen almost completely silent. Tommy wiped his eyes with his gloves and looked at Ali, really looked at him. This wasn't just the greatest boxer who ever lived. This was a man who had somehow found a way to carry a message from beyond, to heal a wound that had been festering for 3 years. "Why?" Tommy asked. "Why are you telling me this now?" Ali smiled, and for the first time all night it wasn't the confident smile of a champion. It was the gentle smile of a man who understood pain and loss and the healing power of truth. "Because," Ali said, "sometimes winning the fight isn't about what happens in the ring. Sometimes it's about what happens in here." He tapped his glove against Tommy's chest, right over his heart. The referee stepped between them, demanding that they continue fighting or he would stop the contest. But neither man was really thinking about boxing anymore. Tommy looked out at the crowd, then at his corner where Mickey was shouting instructions he couldn't hear. Finally, he looked back at Ali. "Thank you," he said simply. Ali nodded. "You ready to finish this fight the right way?" Tommy understood what he meant. This wasn't about winning or losing anymore. This was about honoring his father's memory, honoring the promise he'd made as an 8-year-old boy, and honoring the journey that had brought him to this moment. The final round was unlike anything anyone in Madison Square Garden had ever seen. Tommy and Ali fought with a combination of skill and respect that elevated the sport beyond mere competition. They exchanged punches with the precision of masters, but there was no hatred, no animosity, no desperation. Tommy fought with a peace he'd never felt before. Every punch he threw carried the weight of 15 years of preparation, but also the lightness of finally being free from the guilt that had haunted him. When Ali caught him with clean shots, Tommy smiled. When Tommy landed his own punches, Ali nodded appreciatively. With 1 minute left in the fight, Tommy caught Ali with a perfect right hand that would have knocked out most fighters. Ali staggered backward, his legs unsteady, and Tommy could have rushed in for the finish. Instead, he stepped back and allowed Ali to recover. "Why?" Ali asked, genuinely curious. "Because," Tommy replied, "you already gave me what I came here to get." They finished the round trading respectful combinations, two masters of their craft putting on a display of the sweet science that would be talked about for generations. When the final bell rang, they embraced in the center of the ring, and the entire crowd rose to its feet in recognition of what they had witnessed. The judges' scorecards were academic at that point. Tommy had won the fight by 2 points on 2 cards and by 1 point on the third. But as the referee raised his hand in victory, Tommy felt no triumph, no vindication, no sense of conquest. Instead, he felt something much more valuable: peace. In the post-fight interview, Tommy was asked about the turning point in the fight, about the moment when everything seemed to change. "Muhammad Ali reminded me why I started boxing in the first place," Tommy said, looking directly into the camera. "It wasn't about beating him, it was about honoring a promise I made to my father. And tonight, I finally kept that promise." The reporter pressed for more details, but Tommy just smiled and shook his head. Some things, he realized, were too sacred to share with the world. Later, in the quiet of his dressing room, Tommy sat alone with his thoughts. He was the new heavyweight champion of the world, but that title felt secondary to the gift that Ali had given him. For the first time in 3 years, Tommy felt like his father would have been proud of the man he'd become. Mickey knocked on the door and entered with a small smile on his weathered face. "So," the old trainer said, "was it everything you thought it would be?" Tommy considered the question carefully. "It was more than I thought it would be. It was exactly what I needed it to be." Mickey nodded, understanding, without needing explanation. "Your father would have been proud, Tommy, not just of the win, but of the way you won it." Tommy looked up at his trainer, this man who had believed in an 8-year-old boy's impossible dream and helped make it reality. "Mickey," he said, "what do you think happens to people after they die?" The old trainer sat down heavily in a folding chair. "I think," he said after a long moment, "that love doesn't die, and I think that sometimes, when we need it most, that love finds a way to reach us." Tommy nodded, feeling the truth of those words settle into his bones. Outside, he could hear the crowds dispersing, people heading home to tell their friends and family about the fight they'd just witnessed. But Tommy knew that the real story of this night couldn't be captured in newspaper headlines or television highlights. The real story was about a boy who had made a promise to himself, a father who had never stopped believing in his son, and a champion who had found a way to carry a message of love across the impossible distance between life and death. As Tommy finally stood up to leave the arena, he felt his father's presence one more time, not as a ghost or a spirit, but as a warm certainty in his heart that some bonds can never be broken, not even by death. The 8-year-old boy who had watched Muhammad Ali on a black-and-white television had finally kept his promise. But more importantly, he had learned that the greatest victories aren't won with fists, they're won with love, forgiveness, and the courage to let go of the weights we carry that were never meant to be ours alone. Tommy Morrison walked out of Madison Square Garden that night as the heavyweight champion of the world. But he also walked out as something even more valuable, a son who had finally made peace with his father's memory, and a man who understood that some fights are won not by knocking your opponent down, but by helping them and yourself stand up. Hey, my friends, help me by subscribing to the channel so we can reach 1,000 subscribers, even if you're watching from your TV or computer. Your subscription makes all the difference, and the algorithm will help you see more amazing stories. Leave a like or an emoji in the comments and be part of this growth.